So this is a quick overview of my design thinking diary for the submission. So first of all is my design iteration cycle, and then this is just a look at how of my thinking throughout the project, how I went from need finding all the way to realizing the final solution, and where I jumped backwards and forwards throughout the way. So then I went on and I looked at this was at the beginning when I looked at the problem brief that we were given, and I tried to break down the different words of the problem brief. Next up, then I had my mood board. So this was just things that interest me. So I started off with farming and tailoring, which was all very broad. Um, and then I brought in some of the material that I kind of wanted to use, and this kind of focused me on designing. So when I had my initial ideas, I tried to incorporate some of the initial ideas in of the design. Um, then I went on and I did some more research on farming and farm safety, farm loneliness, and environmentals on farm. Still, I hadn't actually decided on a problem brief or anything like that. And it was at this time then I actually came up with my problem statement. So I wanted the safekeeping of medicines and chemicals on a farm and disposal of these hazardous materials too. So I made a problem statement, and then next up was a problem brief. So that was just realizing the storage unit for medicines and also the safe disposal. Next up, then I did some more in-depth research on chemicals on farms, um, chemicals and medicines on farms, and the importance of having safety for them. Looked at poisoning in children, all this data. Then I looked at some of the effects that these harmful chemicals have on the body. Then looked at Chagas and some of the directives that they actually have implemented. So then, like that, you need to record all the medicines you use. So I kind of wanted to incorporate some of this into my design. Then just a conversation I had with my father about the disposal of hazardous material. Moving on then was from EPA how these things are different things are disposed, this hazardous material. Um, then went on to health and safety on the farm. So again, yeah, this is the disposal of hazardous materials, and again trying to incorporate this into my final design. So all these this red stuff down the red boxes and red writing, that's things that I want to incorporate into my design. Then here's a quick analysis, the requirements of my project. So looking at all the different things from user safety, ergonomics, all that sort of thing. Then coming back around. I then had some idea development, and I looked at how my initial idea and how my material has influenced my design. Um, and then here's more some of the idea development. So how all the different things I looked at, the red writing comes back up, and how this has come into my design. Moving on, then I went on to more in-depth idea development and the ergonomics. So the sizes that I'd have to make everything. This would have been due to the hand size and the size of the medicine bottles that it would be holding. Moved on obviously then to the size of the sharps disposal unit that was going to be incorporated into the project. And then here's just a work and drawing. So I did out the design on SolidWorks because I kind of needed this before I could actually start a project because I didn't really know the sizes. And then once I got it all on SolidWorks, saw that it was all moving and everything was fitting okay, then I went off and I was able to actually realize the project. I did a little bit of background on the material that I used. So I had bed frames, and then I also have the piano bench on this side. The piano bench that actually was broken anyway, and the piano bench was from my brother had made it, and it was from Letter Frax, so it was you could trace back all the timber, and it was sustainably sourced. And then the bed frame, I was a little bit less sure of where this came from, but I think it was IKEA. So I assume that the timber is likely sourced from Sweden. Moving on, then I did some experiments. So this was a collision experiment, just to make sure that when this inside compartment twists around, that it doesn't touch the back up here. So this was an experiment I need to do before starting the make of it. Then I went on and I looked at this joining here and looked, does it need, would glue be enough, or would I need dowels as well? So I just did the exact same, one with dowels, one without dowels, both with glue, yeah, and glued them together, and then used a mallet to try and apply pressure to the joint. And the one with glue failed, and then the one with glue and dowels didn't. So then I knew I had to use glue and dowels to join these timbers. Then I moved on to realizing, and some of the problems I encountered while realizing. So just the problem here was that these strips were pinned down as well as strips, so I just needed to use a chisel and a mallet to remove that piece of timber going along there. Next up, there was bolts here that were hard to take out, and they were also would have left a large hole in the finished material, so I just decided to cut them off with the bandsaw. Then next up was just some of the machining that I did, squaring up all the material and getting it ready to be lamboarded. Then I just looked at this compartment, how I did this. So I actually have to work out the measurements here, and then draw this curve and then cut it on the bandsaw. Here's just lamboarding on the side, how I lamboarded that together. And then this was another problem that I encountered. So I glued my laminate and my material together, but it actually failed because this material, the birch ply laminate that I had, was actually too smooth, so the glue couldn't actually attach to anything. So what I did was I got 100 grit sandpaper and started sanding down this side, one side, but where it was going to be glued in to make it rougher. And then I glued it again, and then this time it didn't fail. So that was kind of something that I kind of learned from after the first time I made the mistake of just gluing it. Then the next one, so just marking the holes here, I used a bradawl, used a cordless drill, but to overcome the problem of what depth to go down, I just stuck some tape and I went down then this distance for each of my holes. So that was just to help me to gauge what's length dowel, and also not to go too far down or too short. Next problem that I encountered was when I was gluing these, I applied the clamps on the far side where pressure needs to be put on, but I found that this side then started pushing in. So I just used a clamp and just pushed it out against. So I kind of used the clamp in its opposite way, and I was able to push the two pieces apart, and then they glued correctly after that. And then over on this side, I just used an air stapler to pin the back on, just really for ease. And then this was my final project. Here it is without anything put on it. Here you have all the signage for recording what medicines were used, the gloves, and the medicines, and then over here you can see the medicines where they're in actually the storage, so children they can't fall and break, or they can't cause any harm. And then I finally just came up with some possible modifications. So earlier on in my design thinking diary, you could see that I wanted to incorporate a sharps disposal unit, but when I bought the sharps disposal unit, I found that it ended up being too big and it wouldn't really look correct if I incorporated it into my project. So I actually just left it out, and one of my modifications would be is if I bought a smaller one and then incorporate that into it. And then over another possible modification would be to put in a shelf. So if I put in a shelf halfway up this, you will be able to store twice as many medicines, although it would restrict the height of the medicines. So there will be maybe some negatives to that as well. So that is my design thinking diary.